Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Umar Khalid. But today is the 13th of January 2022. These are the stories that we'll be discussing during the course of the show. We'll begin, ladies and gentlemen, by the projection by the World Bank, which is quite optimistic and positive as far as Pakistan is concerned. What it says that in 2022, growth in the South Asian region is going to accelerate by 7.6% in 2022, as these pandemic-related projections are now dissipating slowly and steadily, and before slowing down to 6% in 2023. It also talks about Pakistan's economy that will grow by 3.4% in the current fiscal and 4% in the year 2022-2023. This is what we are going to discuss first of all in today's show. Our second segment, ladies and gentlemen, concerns Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan that has gone through a lot of turmoil of late. There have been protests because of fuel hikes, protests that then went out of control, and then Russian forces had to be brought in. About 2,500 Russian forces were brought in, and now that there is a new prime minister, it is said that there is a relative calm, but how long is the calm going to remain before the storm erupts again, or is this calm really very, very temporary? This is going to be our second segment. Then, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be talking about a Moroccan court that on Wednesday, that is yesterday, has sentenced a university lecturer to 2 years in jail over accusations that he traded good grades for sexual favors. This was reported by local media. This was the first such verdict in sex for good trade scandal that has now rocked the North African country since September last year. A lot of other cases have also been reported, and this is going to be our third story. Our last story, ladies and gentlemen, is on a very good note. After 74 years, two brothers have reunited at the Kartarpur corridor. As you know that when this corridor was opened, this was to reunite people, to make all the people from the Sikh community come and visit their places of worship. But this has also of late been a place where families, where long lost relatives have now come to meet each other after decades. Case in point, these two brothers after 74 years. Let's begin with our first story, ladies and gentlemen, and that concerns of course, the World Bank note, the World Bank report that has come out that talks about Pakistan's economy surpassing its own projections. More in the following report.
In the growing challenges of pandemic havoc, Pakistan's economic indicators remained well calibrated. This is evident by the World Bank Global Economic Prospects Report 2022, which predicts the GDP in South Asian region to surge by 7.6% next year. Growth in Pakistan surprised on the upside, supported by improving domestic demand, high remittance inflows, and a narrow targeting of lockdowns. The World Bank forecasts Pakistan's GDP growth rate is expected to be 4% in 2022 to 23, benefiting from structural reforms that would improve export competitiveness and the financial viability of power sector. Since the revitalization of the economy will pave the way to productivity, jobs and reviving investment, the State Bank of Pakistan took an initiative to introduce temporary economic refinance scheme intending to give businesses an incentive for not delaying their investment decisions due to the pandemic-related uncertainty. Moreover, the Prime Minister's Economic Strategy Group predicted a 4.5% economic growth rate for the current fiscal year. According to the Pakistan Institute of Development Economics, the country will need to grow at a rate of 7 to 9% per year for several decades to absorb the youth bulge. Simultaneously, Prime Minister Imran Khan stated that profits of listed businesses grew 59% year-on-year for the first 9 months, despite COVID challenges, and the Pakistan stock market claimed the highest profit in 10 years. It's pertinent to mention here that Pakistan as a developing economy is on the recovery track to sustain growth momentum.
To discuss more on this, we've been joined in the studios by Abdul Jaleel, who's a leading economist. Abdul Jaleel Saab, thank you very much to have joined us in the studios. Abdul Jaleel Saab, this report by the World Bank that talks about high GDP ratio in the South Asian region, that of 7.6%. What are the basic reasons behind it? We've had a huge pandemic that hasn't still gone.
That hasn't still gone, and the challenge is very serious still. But thanks God that we are still placed in a very, I would say, in a very fortunate situation if we compare ourselves with the Western European country where pandemic is going up and up every day with very fast speed. As far as, now we see some silver lightning in if you see in our economic scenario, it is because after certain, I would say, the far-reaching changes the government have pursued under some under the program of the restructuring of the public sector and the government sector restructuring program. In this respect, for example, PIA is one of them, where they have pursued the policy of short sizing and keeping those personnel who are really vital and technically well qualified to run the organization, and it is paying some dividend as well. Now, this similar program they have to pursue with the steel mill, which is another big public sector organization, and which has been known to have produced a lot of wealth for the country as well. And I think the government has to do more. This is a good beginning, but we have to keep a sharp eye. Number two, and number three, I think the number of the tax reform which they have taken in this respect. Tax reform it has brought about a new dynamism in Federal Board of Revenue performance, and the tax realization has gone up as well. But still, there are very big challenges when the corporate sector, the common man, if they are paying taxes, similarly they would like to
they expect certain things in as
a quality service,
of course,
a quality service,
and that needs to be worked upon. Well, there are two reasons that the report projects as far as Pakistan's economy is concerned, that it says is going to grow by 3.4% in the current fiscal year and 4% in the fiscal year 2022-2023. The two things are structural reforms, and the second is improving the financial viability of the power sector. How important have these two been in your point of view, sir?
Power sector, this is one of the biggest challenges which have really bedeviled Pakistan economy, I would say. It have created a lot of threats for our, because when the price of the energy tariff, when it goes up, certainly it is bound to reflect itself through increase price of the product as well. And when you are not in a position to compete compete in the international market, so far as the price structure is concerned, so certainly your export would suffer. And our export has been suffering a lot in this respect as well. Power structure has to be, I would say that we have to create new power structure. Hydel base is the one that should be encouraged, and secondly, we must try to explore other avenue as well, because this is a sector which plays very important role in the production sector. And if you try to see the indicators, our manufacturing sector is still it is marching forward, but at a snail pace.
And why is that in your point?
The reason being that the cost of production is very heavy, and that's not competitive in international market, even in domestic market, which is flooded with the Chinese goods, and they are much more cheaper. They are much more cheaper with respect to those domestic goods.
All right. Abdul Jaleel Sahab, the report also makes a comparison of Pakistan with other countries in the region and talks about India, Bangladesh, Nepal, and different growth percentages, the GDP growth that they will be having as well. When it talks about Pakistan, compares it with other countries, let's take it point by point. It says that both Bangladesh and Pakistan saw their goods trade deficit widen to record levels on strong domestic demand and rising energy prices. What has, in your point of view, contributed to this?
I would say that our leadership failure right from the very beginning has been in the field of the energy production sector. We did not pay enough attention to the development of the energy resources, especially Kalabagh Dam was one of the possibility which has not been upheld. As a result of it, the national economy, national agriculture have suffered a lot. Secondly, and then we have not made much investment in this respect, especially on the development of the hydro resources. Thanks God, this government have taken some of the steps as well, but we have a lot to do in this sector as well. Then we are producing energy, the electricity out of, especially in Sindh province, out of Sui gas as well. This is again, I would say, now the gas is becoming again a rare commodity in this country.
Especially in winter season.
It's a winter season, and it's a wastage of the big resources, because this is the resource which we use for the production of fertilizer, and the price of fertilizer is going up. So consequently, it will have an impact on the agriculture production as well.
Jalil Sahab, there are other points that it mentions as well, and I'd really like to have your opinion on that. It also talks of real expenditure having contracted in the year 2021 in Pakistan because of fiscal pressures. Why do you feel there is too much of fiscal pressure on Pakistan?
You know, our country unfortunately is deeply indebted. That's a big problem. You know, more than 100 billions now. It has crossed more than 100 billions, and the government have to now. And then there is a we are placed in a very unfortunate situation that we have to now borrow money in order to pay back money, and plus interest is also compounding every day. Therefore, the government has to come up with some drastic policy reform within the economic management sector as well. And
but will it be a bitter pill for the public to swallow if it comes with drastic measures?
You have to make them a stakeholder. In this respect, I would say the lower middle class and the middle class, especially you have to take them into confidence. You have to enrich them or equip them with skills, with proper financial resources, so that they should be able to start their own venture on a self-sustaining basis. Likewise, agriculture sector is contributing a lot towards the national development, about 22 to 24% of the GDP. So the agriculture sector should not be ignored at all.
All right.
Because right now there are some, I do not see some good indicator with respect to the price of the fertilizer as well.
Okay.
If the price of the fertilizer, if it goes up, certainly it is bound to affect the farmer ability to cultivate, ability of cultivation.
All right.
Therefore, the government must try to facilitate a small farmer and the medium farmer.
Okay, in order for the economy to sustain itself and to stabilize itself. There's another comparison that the report makes between Pakistan and Sri Lanka. It says that both the countries have reversed the lows that were reached during the pandemic by long-term bond yields. Do you feel these long-term bonds can work in the long term as well?
You know, provided you could utilize this money very quickly on the creation of a vital asset. You do not spend this money on meeting your administrative expense. Today, Governor State Bank have given a statement the government is required to cut down or curtail its administrative expense or the expense which is being spent on running the government. That is. That in this respect, I believe that the government has to do right sizing and short sizing of the bureaucratic structure.
All right.
This is very important.
Won't it hurt a lot of people?
No, the question is that you have to do it with some strategy. You create an alternate opportunity in a private sector as well. You provide an incentive.
All right. All right. What about the tightening of the region's monetary policy as far as comparing this to high inflation in Pakistan?
You know, we all know that the modern economy, it is based upon I would say it is based upon on the relationship. It is based upon the factor of upon those factors which bring about harmony between the economic resources and the production resources, manpower resources of the region. If the region is, if relationship at a regional level are facing some crisis, then it becomes pretty hard to find, to find and substitute as well. And if you find out, it would be a much costlier as well.
All right.
The regional, it's a concept of and I would say that the regional economic bloc should be pursued by opening up, new avenue of the development within the region as well, on partnership basis, on cooperation basis. In this respect, for example, I give you the example of Afghanistan. Afghanistan is facing some economic crisis deeply. They are running short of the.
And of course, that is also one of the reasons why the economy of the South Asian region is not developing as it should.
But with India, we have problems certainly. But with Iran, we can, especially Iran has got a lot of petrol and the gas as well. So, and we need petrol and gas as well. And I think so that there is this is a very, a very strong ground exists for the development of our petroleum sector or for our energy sector as well, and this opportunity should be utilized. And then the government have, this government, I would say, the government have to pay attention to the development of TAPI agreement. You know, they were supposed to bring gas from Turkmenistan via Afghanistan to Pakistan as well. So, and Iran was also one of the stakeholder as well. But the government, the aspect has to renew its effort.
All right. Do you feel, Jalil Sahab, that the per capita incomes in countries such as Pakistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bhutan are going to be affected in the years to come because of A, the pandemic, because of A, the other fiscal issues that these countries are facing?
Epidemic is a very big challenge. And it is already, epidemic is a very big challenge which has already influenced the market mechanism and also the production opportunity as well. And the market are becoming slow. Economy have gone into recession in many countries of the world, even in the Western country. Firstly, and I would say in days to come, in the days to come, the biggest challenge exists in field of agriculture and food market as well. The government is required, and we will have to, I would say Pakistan being an agriculture country have carry every opportunity and every facility to develop its agriculture resource and its production as well. And we must make a renewed investment in it. And I would say that the government should develop an ambitious program for modernization of the agriculture system, because the Chinese have shown a lot of interest in it. They say that if you have got a surplus food, you can export to us easily, and it's a neighboring country.
How important, Abdul Jalil Sahab, is it for Pakistan to become more of an export-oriented country? Because our Prime Minister has himself said very recently that if we not increase our exports, we'll have to go again to the IMF in the future.
You know, there are two fields in which we can increase our export. Number one, I will say the agriculture. Agriculture, because the food is becoming now expensive all over the world.
Of course.
China totally dependent, now China depends upon imported food as well. They need a lot of imported food. Unfortunately, we have not paid attention towards this golden opportunity which exists in our neighboring country. So I think the government must try to take a drastic step to improve agriculture production in the country so that we should be able to export it, and that export will of course help us in improving our accounting deficit, number one. And number two is that software. Software sector, the software engineering, software development,
IT sector in general.
sector. It is very the IT sector services are very expensive in the Western country, and the Western corporate sector more or less depends upon India and the developing country expertise for production of a software.
But the STZs are also being developed in Pakistan, so I think that is also a measure in the right direction.
Government, I would say the government still, I mean, say our base is small, our base is narrow as compared to the requirement which exists in the international market. So we should come up in a revolutionary manner, in a drastic manner, to come up to demand of the international market.
All right. Finally, Abdul Jalil Sahab, how optimistic are you as far as Pakistan's economic upheaval is concerned or stability is concerned in the years to come? Do you agree with the projections that the report has said about 4% in the fiscal year 2022-2023? Do you feel it could be more? And if so, what are your reasons behind it?
You know, in this respect, although the government carry out an agenda under economic reform, spree, and some of the step have paid dividend to the nation as well. But much more is to be done. Number one is the restructuring of the public sector organization. This is very important. And restructuring must involve short sizing and right sizing. The overburden by non-productive staff have already caused a lot of problem in field of efficiency and production of the corporate sector, of the public sector organization. Number one. Number two, the tax reform has to be carried out. It has to be carried
across the
out
board.
Across the board, and the middle and the lower middle class needs a lot of, I would say, needs a lot of compensation in this respect as well. Because of the inflation, they are losing their purchasing power. So they have to be compensated.
And they have to be given the confidence.
Yes. And SMEs.
Okay.
We have
All
to
right.
simplify.
All right. Abdul Jalil Saab, thank you very much to have joined us. We were discussing Pakistan's economy in the wake of the World Bank report. We'll be back after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Our second segment, ladies and gentlemen, concerns Kazakhstan, a former Soviet state now under a lot of unrest since the last few days because of a protest that began due to a fuel hike early in January, something that escalated beyond the means of Kazakhstan, so Russian troops had to be brought over. Now that they are leaving today, let's watch this short report on the history of this unrest in Kazakhstan, and then we'll return with our guest.
Since the onset of 2022, Kazakhstan has been gripped by most intense and violent protests in its 30-year history of independence. The small localized protests originating in western town of Zhanaozen swelled towards the country's largest city and economic hub, Almaty, gradually precipitating into arson and looting. Though this wave of countrywide mass protests was spurred by a gas price hike, but myriad fault lines have been exacerbating in the country since decades. Earlier, oil-rich Kazakhstan was gripped by violent protests back in 2011, when primary cause of mass uprising was labor conditions at oil fields. Sharing socio-economic grievances, protesters demanded an end to what they describe as corrupt political system. The government's reversal on fuel price cap, as well as President's 5th January decision to sack the cabinet and remove former long-time President Nursultan Nazarbayev from the chairmanship of Kazakhstan's Security Council, did little to placate public anger. The Kazakh President Kassym Tokayev termed the protests an attempted coup d'etat, while blaming the unrest on foreign-trained terrorists and ordered large-scale counter-terrorism operation. At President's request, the Russia-led Collective Security Treaty Organization, CSTO, sent troops to restore order, an intervention that coincided with escalating Russia-US tensions ahead of new talks on the Ukraine crisis. Russian President Vladimir Putin claimed victory in defending Kazakhstan from what he described as a foreign-backed terrorist uprising. Kazakhstan is replete with natural resources, but economic fortunes have not been trickled down towards grassroots level, resulting in stark economic inequality.
Now to discuss Kazakhstan, we've been joined in the studios by Air Commodore retired Iftikhar Ahmed Bajwa, who is an analyst. Sir, thank you very much to have joined us. Sir, January, Kazakhstan, worst unrest in 30 years. Was it just a fuel hike, sir, or was there much more to that?
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Yes, it started off with a fuel hike, but there's never one thing. It's a authoritarian type of a state where human values are not the way they are in the West, and disparity between the rich and the poor, or the mafias or the normal people is too big. And above all, their ex-president Nursultan Nazarbayev, he left office after long years in office, and the next man came in, new president Tokayev, he took over. And the legacy of the previous regime is still very influential, and it appears from the facts around that the previous regime people, they tried to fuel whatever started with the price hike protests.
All right. Now, sir, also dozens, it started with the fuel hike, then you started to hear about the arrests of tens, then dozens, then hundreds of people. Then the Russian troops were brought in under, of course, the CSTO, the Collective Security Treaty Organization. And now, of course, they are leaving today. The Russian President Vladimir Putin also says that the unrest has ended in Kazakhstan. Has the unrest really ended in Kazakhstan? Do you feel this is just a little trailer of what we might see in the future as well in Kazakhstan? Do you feel Kazakhstan needs to have a lot of introspection as to how they can correct their own administration in the near future?
For the time being, it appears to have settled to a great extent. But I think these states, these Central Asian states, they have a very different type of governance system. And they have a very heavy-handed administration. In Kazakhstan, the issue was that Nursultan, he was in the office for very long time. And when he left, he was still given an honorary portfolio, but he had lot many people in the higher positions who were actually continuing his legacy. And it started with maybe fuel hike and the people's unrest. But those who were influential in the intelligentsia and intelligence services and police and other services, they did not apparently effectively control the whole situation. I think the best thing the new president, Tokayev, he did was that he called in Russian troops under the CSTO, Collective Security Treaty, to handle the situation. And the situation appears to have handled so far, but it can't be said that this is a long-term settlement. I think it may continue to be the same.
To slowly simmer maybe before it burns again. But he has also nominated a new Prime Minister,
Yes.
Ali Khan Ismailov. Do you feel that could also help maybe steam out some of the dissent that has come out from the people in Kazakhstan?
For the time being, yes, it will. And if the new president, if he's able to remove all those who were influential in the previous regime or who are the loyalists to Nursultan Nazarbayev, if he's able to expel them or put them off, I think he would be successful for the time being. But I don't think even then the chances, one can say that the chances would go to zero. I don't think so. It may erupt any time.
All right.
Why? Because the disparity between the rich and the poor, this Kazakhstan being a very rich state in apparent financial terms, the situation of a common man is not that good.
All right.
So this may erupt any time.
All right.
Maybe later
One
this
more
year.
thing, although Almaty is not the only place where this whole situation erupted, there have been other areas as well. There are a lot of issues that the media have called upon. There is the influence of the elite that we've discussed. There's also corruption, one of the very important factors that people are more or less fed up of. Do you feel that the current regime in Kazakhstan could maybe take care of that in an effective manner, or do you feel this is a long way in coming? It will take a long time before this is properly handled.
Usual phenomena of the state, when we talk of other than some turmoil or big thing happening, in routine it is time taking and it will take time, and the present regime appears to be quite sincere, I would say, in streamlining things, but it will take time. And if we count on to just the disparity, if he's been able to do something about the overall situation of the common people, I think he would be successful, and the people are rest assured if he can assure the people that he will be doing it, I think he will have a comparatively comfortable time. But he will have to do a lot, because it's, one should not say, but to be more clear and elaborate, it is actually like a mafia state, and the mafia states do not come to streamlined terms with just one regime change or
All right.
something.
Now, we know that the Russian troops were brought in, about 2,500 troops, and they are about to leave today. Now, there are a lot of concerns among different countries that Moscow could leverage this mission of 2,500 troops to shore up its influence in Kazakhstan. I would like to refer to what Anthony Blinken said last week, that once Russians are in your house, it's sometimes very difficult to get them to leave. Do you agree or disagree?
I don't think, I personally would not like to agree with the statement, because they are leaving. And so far as the leverage is concerned, definitely Russia would be at an advantageous position when it comes to its relation with the state. And this CSTO, this Collective Security Treaty, is a treaty. According to that treaty, they moved in, and the president called in. So I think there's nothing illegal. And I think he lacked some amount of trust amongst his own people who were supposed to handle the situation. So he very abruptly, I would say, called in the Russian troops to handle the situation, and they did handle. And he ordered sort of shoot to sight, like
Yes.
it's things are not very clear, but the people say that there are rumors or there are reports, unconfirmed, that there are many deaths, and they handled the situation with brutal brute force.
All right. Now, also, sir, what I'd like to understand is that in the last 24 hours, we've heard of more people being detained, more or less 1,700 people being arrested. Now, the total amount of number of people is 12,000 who have been arrested for alleged participation in these anti-government protests. What is going to happen to these people? And if they are not, if they continue to remain in detention, do you feel this is going to have a spillover effect as far as these protests are concerned?
It may have a spillover effect, but these states have a long history of handling such people, and they do not have laws like the laws in the West or in the most modern world, and they handle such things with a lot of, I would say, streamlined, not streamlined, the brute force, I would say. So they may continue to be in detention. However, if the present regime is able to do something about the plight of the common people, I think even if the chances are there, the chances would subside.
All right. Final question. I'd like a very short response to you. The president of Kazakhstan blames foreign militants, the hand of foreign militants in these protests. They talk about neighboring Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, and Tokayev also has said that foreign militants and terrorists have been behind it. Do you agree with that statement?
There is no conclusive evidence that there is any foreign element or foreign terrorist they have played any role.
All right.
So far. But as he has said, there are chances that definitely there are states and the neighbors and people who like to take and leverage or like to interfere and try and pursue their own agendas. There is always a possibility, but so far I think there's nothing as such.
All right. Thank you very much, Commodore Retired Iftikhar Ahmed Bajwa Sahab, to have joined us and to have talked to us about Kazakhstan. There's been a lot of unrest, ladies and gentlemen, in Kazakhstan, and we hope is that this country becomes peaceful again. Signs are there that this country will remain peaceful, but I hope there's not that involvement of foreign militants as has been enunciated by the president of Kazakhstan. Thank you very much again, sir, to have joined us. Let's come to our last two segments, ladies and gentlemen, very quickly. First of all, we'll take you to Morocco, where a lecturer has been jailed for 2 years over sex for grades. And this is the first such verdict in a sex for grades scandal that has rocked this North African country since September last year. Moroccan media had picked up social media leaks at that time of messages that had been exchanged between lecturers and students. We have seen examples of that all across the world, but in this country now, stricter measures are being taken as a repercussion. In 2018 also, Morocco had changed its legislation so that the perpetrators of harassment, aggression, sexual exploitation or ill treatment could face these prison terms, but some argue that the law still fails to protect the womankind in the country. Nevertheless, an important step to protect the students from such mishaps. And let's come to our last segment, ladies and gentlemen, that concerns Kartarpur corridor and the reuniting of two brothers after a period of 74 years. Now, Kartarpur corridor, when it was of course constructed and open to the general public, it was for the Sikhs of all the different regions of the world to come and go to their holy places of worship. What it has also done, as on a side note and on a very important side note, is reunite people and families from across the border, from different places of the world. Now, Muhammad Siddiq, 80 years old, and Habib, 78 years old, were separated 74 years ago at the time of partition. As you can see in the parallel window, they hugged and they cried when they met each other after this long period of separation. Siddiq is a resident of Pugram village in the outskirts of Faisalabad, and he had contacted a Sikh social worker from Canada 2 years back. He said the social worker had helped reunite these two brothers, and according to Siddiq, his brother and sister had gone to his grandparents' house with his mother in 1947, and now they are reunited in 2022. We hope and we wish to see more such reunions through avenues such as the Kartarpur corridor. After all, this is what these corridors are for, uniting people. With that, we come to an end of today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with new segments, stories, and of course events that are happening in Pakistan and across the globe. In the meantime, as I end always my show with, kindly keep yourself safe, get yourselves vaccinated, whether it be normal dose or the booster dose, and follow the SOPs. Allah Hafiz.